Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Hessen, and this is TV7's Editor's Note. And in today's edition, I am more than delighted to once again welcome to our studio Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, formerly the commander of the Israeli
Air Missile
Defense. Right? You had so many titles that I every time need to think which one to use, but nonetheless, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm proud of this one. And it is always a pleasure to be here, Jonathan. I've told you more than once that the advantage of being with you here, and I think this is also the advantage of TV7, that we really could go in depth into issues. So thank you for inviting me.
Just for the sake of our viewers, those who do not know, you might have heard of the system Iron Dome. So Brigadier General Gavish was the man who was hands-on integrating the Iron Dome into the Israeli Air Force, into the IDF, and you were the first one to utilize it into operational activity.
Well, I did, Jonathan. I had the privilege with a lot of other guys to introduce the Iron Dome into the defense of Israel as the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense. But I think that, when we're going back to this era, it was not only the issue of Iron Dome. It is really looking at the strategy of how do we deal against rockets and missiles. And back then, we didn't have the Arrow 3, we didn't have the David Sling, but we visioned it. Because we knew that this is the next generation. We talked about the multi-tier defense. We talked about the main pillar of the defense of Israel against rockets and missiles. So quite a lot of the foundations of what we are seeing today were laid during this time. And I'm very proud to be part of these people that were there. And still doing research.
At the time, they weren't very keen on taking credit because everybody was very skeptical about the success.
Well, you're right. It's today everyone invented the Iron Dome, but back then it was more challenging. I always compare it to startup, because today I'm working in my civilian life with the startups, and a lot of time when you go to investors, they will tell you, it's not good, leave it, and you hear so many no's. And it was the same with the Iron Dome because there was a budget issue, and there was a concept issue, and there were those that didn't even believe that something like this could work. They would say, how could it be that someone is shooting a bullet from a pistol and then someone else is shooting a bullet from the pistol from the other side, and both of them are meeting in the middle? It won't happen. So there was a lot of skepticism from one side, budget, and also concept. And, we had this statement, the best defense is offense. And I always used to go back to sport, by the way. I told them, for those of you who like basketball, they know that the wins start on the defense. And for those of you who understands football, they have to remember that once you could be the best team in the world, but once your opponent change his way of playing. He's not playing on the ground anymore. He's shooting a very long balls. If you don't have a good goalkeeper, you lose the game. So we need a balanced team. And but at the end of the day, it is the warriors, the men and women that did the job, and of course the system themselves. And right from day one, from the first interceptions, there were on the 7th of April, 2011, 2 rockets were shot from the Gaza Strip toward Ashkelon, 2 Iron Dome interceptions, and it was 100% of success. And this was a point that really, in a way, from a military point of view,
historic.
It's historical, and they changed really the history of how do we fight. And we brought in this significant part of the defense of Israel against rocket, and today we see how efficient it is against all distance.
So, as you mentioned before, just again to clarify for people watching and listening right now, the multi-tier system includes the Arrow 3, which is outer space, basically intercepting ballistic missiles and other type of threats. Germany this week is going to activate its Arrow 3 for the first time. Mm-hmm. That is also very significant, of course, but for Israel, this is merely one tier. Then you have the medium to long range is the David Sling. that also intercepts those type of medium-range ballistic missiles or other type of cruise missiles and such. Finland is going to soon integrate those systems into its air and missile defense. And then we have also the Iron Dome, which everybody speaks about, which is medium to short range. And now we are deploying for the first time laser beams.
Well, you're right, Jonathan. First of all, the multi-tier defense, it is really the Iron Dome for the short range, then the David Sling, then the Arrow 2, and then the Arrow 3. And the other thing that is important to say is that this all multi-tier defense structure could bring in also other systems. And this is what we've seen during the last 2 wars in our world. Interoperability working combined with the CENTCOM assets in the region. And they deployed the THAAD systems and the Aegis, and everything worked together. So this is from one side. But yes, for the short range, at least at the beginning, we would have also the laser, which is very significant. Once again, we have to be humble about it, but it's an amazing success. I mean, during the last 2 years, we had the first interception of the THAAD, the first interception of Arrow 2, operational one, the first interception of Arrow 3, the first interception of Aegis, and now also we had first interceptions of laser systems under operational environment. Although the system was not officially part of the Israeli Air Force, because we were in war, we brought in whatever we can. Although it is still in its R&D phase, but we used it in the last war, mainly against Hezbollah, and it is shown to be very effective. It intercepted tens of threat projectiles that were shot toward Israel. Officially, the system, even much more powerful from the one that we used during the war, would be deployed into the defense of Israel end of this year, beginning of next year.
And R&D, research and development, never stops.
Never stop. Will continue, right. and the laser would be stronger and stronger, and its capability would grow. And we don't like wars, but from a developing point of view of war systems, when you are under a war environment, this is the best test that you could have in order to develop your system. So it's unfortunate, but from the building of the forces, this is the best way of really examining and checking how good are your system. It's not a test that you are doing someplace in the world. This is the real environment.
And there is, of course, also the electronic systems that go
right.
in addition to this that are also very powerful. And we won't delve into the details of this right now, but the Latin phrase goes, si vis pacem para bellum. Whenever you want to prevent a war, prepare for one.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always prevent a war, because you need to be more aggressive in an environment when bad actors are really trying to eradicate you, such as the Islamic Republic of Iran, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the Islamist Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, so on and so forth. We see the Iranians now trying to reinvigorate its war machine across the region after, sustaining a beating, if we put things into context here, but also here in this context, if we may really touch on the issue of the day. Hezbollah, by the end of the year, is expected to disarm. If it does not, Israel should act in order to enforce that it does not regain the capabilities. And the Iranians, this is their assessment right now. And therefore, they are racing to rearm their terror proxy in Lebanon, Israel's northern neighbor. Give us a little bit of an understanding on the complexity of this issue. Of course, nothing is inevitable, and we're praying that the Lebanese government does ultimately bring about the aspired conclusion of this Iranian proxy on our northern front. But if we keep to reality, they don't seem to have the political will or the capacity to really fulfill that obligation.
You're right, Jonathan. And I always go with this sentence, which is very known, seek for peace, prepare for war. And this is what basically, I think that Israel is doing. We are seeking for peace. Also in Lebanon, the trend was still looks good in the sense of the Lebanese government. They are saying that they want to disarm the Hezbollah and so on. So the statements are there. There is a US support, French support, Saudi support. But we need to see things happening on the ground. And this is the main challenge that Israel have. And we have to go back to the 7th of October because one of the main lessons learned, and we talked about it in the past, one of the main lessons learned of 7th of October is that Israel have to look on its national defense strategy. And within the national defense strategy, one of the most important pillars as a lesson learned is prevention. We understand that the enemies around us, unfortunately, they want, exactly as you said, they want us dead. They want to obliterate Israel. This is their aim. So once you understand it, you need to prevent them to be in a position that they could do something like this. So Israel is doing it, and prevention, it's part of the strategy. So now you apply it to Lebanon. And it is really a decision that Israel would have to make. It might be a matter of time. How do we deal with the Hezbollah? Because we have to understand, it's not that Israel is, a happy trigger going to fight against the Hezbollah. It's because the Hezbollah is acting. The Hezbollah is acting, is building its forces. We hear the statements of the Hezbollah leaders. We see what they do. And this is completely different from the peace accord that everyone is talking about Lebanon. It is completely different from disarming the Hezbollah, and the Iranians are still strongly supporting the Hezbollah. So it's a story that we would have to make a decision. When is this exact point that Israel is acting to prevent and not to allow the Hezbollah even to start getting to the point that he would pose a significant threat toward Israel.
The repeated statements coming out of Washington and elsewhere about peace in the Middle East and, prosperity and so on and so forth. One, there is no peace. Two, prosperity, there are a lot of pledges, but people didn't really follow through. Not state actors, not institutions. There is a lot of humanitarian aid streaming into the Gaza Strip, particularly as was stated over the weekend by the U.S. Embassy here in Jerusalem. Roughly 25,000 trucks laden with humanitarian aid entered into the territory, but much of that is being exploited by terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip, basically stealing the aid and reselling it to the poor population, that ultimately then the surplus that the terror groups are making, they are using in order to replenish their ranks, to really regain some momentum and some weaponry in order to once again reignite the violence and hostilities towards Israel as well as to their own people. They are there to stay, and this is something that they are quite adamant about. But if we really see the broader picture and redirecting our attention to the main culprit, namely the Islamic Republic of Iran, there are reports that they are really working really hard to replenish their ballistic missile stockpiles for a next confrontation with Israel. Are we to take out of that they are keen on a second round with the state of Israel on, of course, on a broader scale, seeking potentially to protect Hezbollah, despite the fact that during the 12-day war, Hezbollah stayed out of it? And of course, we still have the Houthis, and we have the Shia organizations in Iraq, and we have other groups operating on Iran's behalf in Syria. Give us a little bit of a net assessment. Mm-hmm. Are we on a course of collision with the Iranians once more?
First of all, we have to remember that Iran is the true destabilizer of the Mediterranean. This is the story. It's not, by the way, only the story of Israel. You would hear it from the Saudis. You would hear it from the Gulf states. The countries around the Mediterranean sees Iran as the destabilizer of the region. They act, by the way, against almost all of them. We saw them striding in Qatar. We saw them attacking Saudi assets in the past. So Iran is a violent entity in the Mediterranean. Of course, when it comes to Israel, because we hear what they say, and once again, going to the understanding of what they mean, we have to believe them. And you are fully right. The Iranians are still, basically, they didn't change their rhetorics. It's almost the same as we heard today. We're looking at what they are doing. They are trying to regain their capabilities. So this is very challenging. And this is something that we would all, I'm saying once again, it is not only Israel issue, but of course Israel is the first one who's looking there, over there, because we are the first one which are threatened. And we would have, I think everyone should look at Iran. It's very unfortunate, but this is the direction that they're going. And in some point, we would have to decide what are we doing with it. And how we are getting to this point that once again, we see that Iran is posing a significant strategic threat toward Israel, and Israel might act and would find a way how to do it. So this is something quite that we are continuously looking at. At the end of the day, we still have to remember that Iran is the number one strategic challenge from the Israeli point of view, and not only for Israel. So from one hand, we hope that all those, let's say, geostrategical development in the Mediterranean would go toward restraining Iran. What is happening in Syria, blocking Iran of rearming Hezbollah and so on, and the Syrian regime seeing Iran as its enemy. We have other challenges in Syria, but when we talk specific about Iran, this is what we should look at. Also, Saudi, the Gulf state, as I said. So I hope that by strengthening the Sunni, I would say, countries around Iran, this would restrain Iran in a way, together with the snapback and of course with the U.S. We hear Trump more than once saying that Iran could join what is happening in the Mediterranean. I think he meant it because we saw President Trump that when he had to make a decision which never was done, he made it. So I think
Operation Midnight Hammer.
Exactly. So I think
very decisive strike against 3 of Iran's nuclear enrichment sites, which that was a devastating blow. But let me raise a point. Since one of the closest allies of the United States in the Middle East, broader Middle East, if I may call it, also a Mediterranean state, namely a NATO ally, Turkey. The foreign minister Hakan Fidan traveled to Tehran over the weekend. He was there yesterday, during the course of which he met with Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic. During a joint press conference, he came out and stated that Ankara and Tehran see eye to eye when it comes to the net threat assessments in the region. And one of the key issues, if not the primary issue, they view Israel's expansionist aspirations in Israel at large as the number one threat to regional stability. This coming from a major NATO ally of the United States that is a good actor on the Ukraine-Russia front in support of Ukraine. But when it comes to the Middle East, I mean, they are the ones who ultimately instilled jihadis in Damascus. They're expanding in Turkey, in Lebanon. Their influence there is the most significant it's been since Ottoman times. And you see they're also now expanding their influence in Iraq more and more. Well, give us a little bit of an understanding, because Turkey is not an enemy to Israel. It's a rival, not an enemy, and it's got its own strategic interests. So does Israel. But apparently, it seems that those two interests, despite having some convergence on a number of issues, are on a course of collision.
I fully agree with you. And the overall statement that Turkey is not an enemy, it's a rival. But, talking about Turkey, if we go 10 or 15 years ago, it's quite amazing where we were there with Turkey. hundreds of thousands of Israelis visiting Turkey, enjoying the beaches of Turkey, the amazing sea, and the environment, the food, all the good things. I mean, there was very good relations between the people of both nations. The Israeli defense companies were working very close with the Turkey relations. The trade between Israel and Turkey relations were very, very good. And Israel was not the one to back up from it. And this is very unfortunate because when we're looking on the trend, and this is the change that we see in Turkey again and again, the Turks are basically supporting our enemies. They are supporting the Hamas. We saw them supporting the Muslim brothers in Egypt in the past. So I think that when we're looking on their behavior and supporting those radical forces in the Mediterranean, they are challenged not only to Israel. They're once again, because I think that, differently from how we looked in the past, and this is, I think, one of the main good things that the Abraham Accord brought to our region, is that we could really look at things and an interest that are aligned between Israel and the countries in the Mediterranean. And going back to Turkey, you see that they are supporting Muslim brothers. You see that they are supporting the Hamas, which other countries, Gulf states, Saudi, and others, are looking on them as a threat. In Egypt, for example, we have to remember that Sisi threw out the Muslim brothers that were supported by Turkey. So countries like Egypt, like Saudi, Gulf state are also seeing it eye to eye with Israel, that Turkey behavior, it's very challenging in the Mediterranean. So I think this is something that, for sure, in a diplomatic, I would say, efforts must be dealt with. And once again, United States is playing a very significant part of it because the relations between United States and Turkey are strong. Between the two leaders are very strong. President Trump called Erdogan his good friend, and we see the relations between them. So I think this is a significant part, and also for the European, this is very important. But I think you raised another very important point, which is Turkey is behaving differently toward Ukraine and the European interest and toward the Middle East. So European countries which are seeing Turkey behavior toward Europe, they're saying, okay, let's not do too much about
there
what
are
is
issues there. There are
of
issues.
course there are issues.
I mean, particularly...
For years there are issues. For example, one of the main issues that Europe and NATO had is purchasing Russia's military equipment because it is not compatible with the NATO systems and all. So there are issues for sure. But in general, I think that this is what we are all seeing toward Turkey, and it's very unfortunate, really. Even from a personal point of view, both of my parents were born in Turkey. My father in Istanbul and my mother is from Izmir. They came to Israel in the 47, but Turkey is a beautiful country. So it's the food is basically one of the best foods. One of the 5 original kitchens of the world is there. So there's a lot of heritage in Turkey, and it's very unfortunate to see where it is going now. So I really hope that this is something that we changed with the time. If we look on Erdogan and his behavior in the past, you could see that he is pragmatic. A lot of the times his behavior...
Very.
Exactly, is pragmatic, man. Even toward Israel. You saw sometimes changes. So this is why I think that if the overall, worldwide, Europe, United States, if all those would signal him the right signals with regard to Israel, I think that this would be very helpful. And also the countries in the Mediterranean. We cannot allow, very unfortunate, but we have to be very firmly about it. We cannot allow this behavior to continue, supporting the Hamas, and the Muslim Brotherhood. I'll give you an example. We talked about, getting back the hostages. This is something that for Israel and for everyone, it was a story of how do we bring the hostages back from the Gaza Strip. One of the main hostages that was there, an Israeli officer that was there.
Goldin.
Yeah, Mr. Golding. He was a commander of a platoon. And he was there. And the Turks were trying to convince the Hamas not to bring him back to Israel lately. So
they did it because they wanted to use it as leverage for Israel to allow Hamas terror operatives currently underground in Rafah to gain safe passage to Hamas areas,
which is aligning with the interest of the Hamas.
Recently, President Trump did designate parts of the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, an executive order which was carried out in the recent 2 weeks. They did leave out the Muslim Brotherhood in Turkey and Qatar, which is very interesting. But unfortunately, we are drawing near to the end of our discussion today. I'd like to thank you, General Gavish, for all that you do, and of course for your contributions to our programs here at TV7, which I think are very impactful to allow people all over the world to really get a glimpse into the thinking here in Israel of leaders just like yourself, military leaders, political leaders, and diplomats and practitioners. So thank you.
And I want to thank you, Jonathan, that for what you're doing here in TV7. I think it is very important. And during my tours in the world, United States, Europe, and so on, I see that there are a lot of viewers. And I think that TV7, from this point of view, and yourself, are doing a super important service to the world and really understanding in depth what is going on in Israel. So thank you.
All glory to God, and we're happy to serve as ever. Thank you again, and I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. I hope this program today will be an eye-opener to many of you. The challenges are mounting, but nonetheless, there are watchmen on the wall looking very, very closely at all those various challenges, so to speak. So from here in Jerusalem, until our next edition, Shalom.
For more of TV7 Israel's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.